Have you ever gone to the doctor and had them whip out their prescription pad after just a few minutes and then send you on your way? My guess is the answer is yes, because in this day and age of modern medicine, that's pretty much the normal protocol, right? And it's kind of infuriating, especially when they hardly ask any questions, nor do they even give you a chance to question the diagnosis. Honestly, it's why I'm not a big fan of traditional medicine and why I always recommend looking for a functional doctor who's committed to looking at the big picture and your health as a whole. And for today's podcast guest, Lisa Groux, an experience very much like the one I just described is exactly what led her down the path of functional nutrition and into a career of helping people heal their bodies through nutrition. She's got a ton of insight to share, and I can't wait to dig in. Welcome to the Feel Better, Live Free podcast brought to you by Thinlicious. I'm your host, Ruth Sukup, and here we'll talk about everything from the science of weight loss to practical tips for making your health a priority in the midst of a busy life. It's a little bit nerdy, a little bit funny, and a little bit revolutionary. So buckle up, friend, because it's about to get real. Hey there, and welcome to the Feel Better, Live Free podcast. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Ruth Sukup, and I'm the founder of Thinlicious and the Thin Adapted System, as well as the New York Times bestselling author of 7 books. And today we're going to be chatting with Risa Groux, a functional nutritionist and the founder of RisaGrewNutrition.com, about the diagnosis that led her down the path of learning everything she possibly could about thyroid conditions, autoimmune, and the role of functional nutrition. And we're going to get to that interview in just a minute. But first, I wanted to quick tell you about one very important thing. And it's that if you're new to this podcast and just trying to learn more about how to get healthy or lose weight in a healthy, sustainable way, then I would love to send you our free starter guide. It's super helpful for understanding just a little bit of the science behind the topics that we cover here on the podcast and why, if you've reached a certain age, it might feel like your metabolism has stopped working. And you can grab it for free at thinlicious.com/guide. Once again, that URL is thinlicious.com/guide. Okay, so with that out of the way, I am so excited to be able to introduce you to today's interview guest, Risa Groux. Hi, Risa. Thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me, Ruth. It's awesome to be here.
Yeah, so I would just love to start by hearing a little bit about you, who you are, what you do, and then let's go from there. Sound good?
Yeah, so I am a functional nutritionist, which means I've been trained in functional medicine. So I'm a freak about reading labs. I'm not really good at playing darts with the lights off when I cannot see the target. And I'm always looking for root causes. I'm also looking for prevention. We try to prevent disease before it already it happens, because that's what conventional medicine does. We wait till you're in full-blown disease until we help you. So we don't do that. I don't do that in my office. And we consider the whole body one interconnective unit. So that's what I do. I've been doing that for decades in my office, and I absolutely love watching people heal. I got started, pretty much always had a passion for nutrition and natural health as long as I could remember. I grew up in a house where my mom was constantly on a diet trying to lose 5 or 10 pounds, just constantly. And
Always.
this bad relationship with food. Some foods are good, some foods are bad. It just was not a very good paradigm for a girl to grow up in. My grandma was doing the same thing. And, she would tell me she's going to the fat farm every year. I later found out it was Canyon Ranch, but it was just this relationship with food and, your identity. So I really wanted to break that. And I really dove in. Once my kids were born, I was reading every single book on nutrition and went back to school and became a clinical nutritionist, and then found functional medicine. In that time that I was going through that, I was diagnosed. I had my first pregnancy after we got married. In 10 minutes, we were like pregnant. Like it was like we wanted to get pregnant, done. We got pregnant, right? So it was like, no problem. I had an easy pregnancy. Everything was great. And then when we started trying for the second, a few years later, we just could not conceive. And then when I did conceive, I would lose the baby. So I had a few miscarriages, and it was super frustrating. And I'm like, what's wrong with my body? And I did everything, you name it, I did it. And then I went to a fertility specialist, and he's like, oh, he took some blood and he said, you've got an underachieving thyroid. Here's a script. And I'm like, what's the script for? And he's like, well, thyroid hormone. And I'm like, well, how long do I take this for? And he's like, well, every day. And I go, no, for how long? And he goes, oh, for the rest of your life. It was that moment I walked out of that office and I thought, why am I taking a synthetic medication for something I was born to make? And why is the doctor not looking at why I'm not making it? I just
Right.
couldn't understand it. I still, to this day, I'm not understanding
And
why.
that's always their solution. Oh, don't even get me started on that.
Yeah, there's a pill for that. So I was like, that's not going to work for me. And I just kept diving and, anyway, it turned out I had MTHFR, the gene mutation that's super common. I test everybody for it. I took some B vitamins, and I ended up getting pregnant. So naturally, which was great. And I had an easy pregnancy and everything was great. And shortly after my son was born, I went to a naturopathic doctor and they finally tested my antibodies, and it turned out I was now diagnosed with Hashimoto's. And I'm like, what is happening to my body? And anyway, that's where I took a deep dive. I never found anything that had that listed root causes. So I just started to investigate. It took me probably close to 10 years to figure out every root cause that would be possible. Of course, I had pretty much all of them. And it took me a while, to go through them and to test for them and then reverse them. And I did all of that. And it was a very long, painful process. But I learned a lot, and I was in nutrition school at the time. And so I've implemented so much of that in my office, and now I've been able to reverse my Hashimoto's.
Wow, that's amazing. Okay, so there's a couple things I want to dive into from what you were saying. First of all, what was the gene mutation that you mentioned?
It's called MTHFR. Just think of what you would say to somebody who cut you off on the freeway. So everybody gets that, right? So it's very, very common. The statistics are 50 to 90% of the population has it, but I test every single person I work with, and I would tell you at least 90% of the population has it. It's a gene
Wow.
mutation that basically means you're not able to methylize or process either your B12 and
Mhm.
or your folate, your B9. So you
Oh,
have to get them from exogenous sources. You will not be able to process them, even if you eat a ton of leafy greens and are getting folate, or you're eating a ton of animal protein and getting B12, you're not able to digest it. You're not able to process it and absorb it. So when we have MTHFR, there are several symptoms, headaches and migraines, anxiety, depression, ADD, ADHD, autism, bipolar schizophrenia, but infertility and miscarriages are two very common symptoms. I didn't
huh.
have any of those symptoms, and most
Right.
people don't. But a lot of kids, I find teenagers in early 20s will come into my office with a lot of anxiety, and we give them some B vitamins. We change their diet a little bit, and off they go. Like the anxiety's gone.
Amazing. So all of this stuff was happening behind the scenes with you personally while you were also studying nutrition, probably eating really well, or what you thought, eating all the right things, doing all the right things. So I'm curious, you started down the traditional nutritionist path, right? And then you switched more to the functional. What was the difference between those two things?
Well, I was really, there's a difference between a dietitian who's really doing more of the government pyramid, food pyramid,
Mhm.
and they're a little bit more focused maybe on low fat and portion control, and you can have a little bit of Coke, but not that much. And I do not subscribe to that. I believe that it's not about moderation. And
Mhm.
by doing what I've been doing for so long, I mean, when I first started my practice, I was like, okay, everybody's on the same food plan, right? This anti-inflammatory food plan. And some people were just absolutely thriving. Their symptoms
Mhm.
were going away, they were losing weight, they were feeling amazing. We could see it on their blood work. And then other people are like, I am bloated, I don't feel well, my stomach's not good. So I realized, it took me a while to realize, but I created what's now my methodology called Food Frame, that everybody should be eating according to their current health status. Because if you have
Interesting.
IBS or you have SIBO, small intestinal bacteria overgrowth, and somebody else doesn't, the person who doesn't have SIBO can eat all the onions and garlic they want. They're not going
Mhm.
to have any issues. But somebody with SIBO who's eating onions and garlic is going to feel horrible. And we're going to continue to feed that, right? Same thing if somebody has autoimmunity, if they're just diagnosed with autoimmunity or they're in major pain with autoimmunity, then I'm going to, after I detox them, I'm going to put them on the AIP protocol, the autoimmune protocol. And then, we jump on different diet types after that because we want to maintain that. But when you have autoimmunity, you have a fire in the basement, a raging fire. So you go to the doctor and they're like, oh, here's a squirt gun. Like, right? That's not going to help me. So we need to get the
Right.
fire hose out, right? And
Right.
food is such a major instrument that we can use to help with that fire out.
Right. So what percentage of the population currently has like some form of autoimmunity issue?
It is growing. There is the statistics that 50 million Americans, mostly women, but men too, and it's growing. We're seeing more autoimmunity, and we're going to, because one of the major contributors, I mean, a third of it is genetics, and another major contributor is leaky gut. We only have one layer of epithelial cells in our intestinal lining, so it's very, very fragile. And when we are exposed to all these chemicals, tons and tons and tons of chemicals, and more, we're getting, right now the FDA has approved 86,000 chemicals for us to use. That's eat, put on our skin, breathe, right? It's crazy.
Yes.
And then with that, and then, the foods that we're eating and, the glyphosate that is in the conventional produce that we're having and everything. It's all these things that are happening. And then, of course, MTHFR is a root cause, and low vitamin D could be a root cause, and viruses and pathogens. A very traumatic emotional event or pregnancy is very typical to
For
ignite.
trigger.
Yeah, exactly. So, with those things, and if you're not taking care of your gut, sure, you're susceptible to autoimmunity. So we're seeing much more of it, and younger kids. I see younger people with autoimmunity. It just breaks my heart.
Yeah. But then when you realize what is in our food and all of the stuff that we're eating, I mean, it's not even that surprising anymore. Nothing surprises me when you really start to dig into it. And then on top of that, the pharmaceutical companies pumping us just full of more medications and more chemicals and all it's like, I don't know how you feel about this, but the more I learn about it, right, the more angry it makes me. But also I just go, why is this what we're talking about right now? Why is this considered alternative, right? Like, how is it that we're talking about like just like eat the right things, right? Fuel your body with the food that's going to heal you. And somehow that's counterculture. It's counterculture to be talking about not wanting to fill our bodies with chemicals. And I'm baffled by that. And yet at the same time, I can't, it makes me so infuriated. And then when you talk even about your experience with the doctor, like that's the solution. Let's go to the doctor and fill our bodies with more drugs. And it makes me crazy. I'm sure you get it. Clearly it makes you crazy too. Maybe not as crazy.
It's not a wellness paradigm. It's a sickness management paradigm.
Yes.
And the food that we eat absolutely can be our greatest form of medicine or our greatest form of poison. And
Yes.
yeah, it should, I mean, we should be screaming from the rooftops. And other countries do not allow their citizens to eat like these foods. It's just, we are okay with poisoning our because it's good for business. And there are several people at the top who are making absolute obscene amount of money, and this is okay. It's crazy.
Okay.
Yeah.
And money talks, right? Who's the biggest advertisers? Who are the biggest lobbyists out there? Like you follow the money trail and it's right there.
70% of commercials on television, 70% are pharmaceuticals.
It's disgusting. It really is. And we're probably one of the only countries that even allows pharmaceuticals to advertise. Yeah. It's makes me crazy. Okay. So let's talk a little bit more about autoimmune specifically, because I think that's a word that comes up a lot, right? And yet I think there's a lot of misconceptions that happen. So what are some of those big misconceptions that happen in regards to autoimmune disease that you've encountered?
Okay, one of them is you can't reverse it. You just have to manage it. Now, there are some that you cannot reverse. I've seen amazing, incredible things that I could not even anticipate in my office. So I never say never. Um, but there are, I'm working with somebody right now as an example, and she came to see me in her, late 30s. She has 3 young kids, and she is very, very busy. Her husband travels a bit, and she is really trying to juggle all of that. She doesn't sleep very much. And was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, and she came to see me, and she was like at a level 8 to 10 in pain every single day. Debilitating pain, can't function, and just in just major pain, and gets through her day that way, and exhausted all the time. So we did, my typical testing. We tested her for blood draw, a pretty comprehensive bioscreen. And then I did stool test, and we found out what was going on with her. I mean, she had just, autoimmunity is inflammation, right? It's just a tremendous amount of inflammation. And she had some leaky gut. And I put her on AIP after I detoxed her. And I just spoke to her last week, and she said, I have like zero pain every day. She goes, maybe 1 or 2 days a week. She's at a 0.5 to a 2, only in her fingers, and it stops when she gets out of bed. I
Amazing.
mean, it's almost like a miracle. This
Yeah.
is who wasn't really functioning. So I didn't give her any medication. I just, I gave her a fire hose to get the inflammation out. And she's been eating very differently than she used to. And so she has been able to now, we haven't done any testing to see if she's still having antibodies, but chances are she'll probably have that for a long time. But I always look for the root cause. So I have been able to reverse rheumatoid arthritis in the past. And colitis is a big one that people kind of leave the house before 11 o'clock in the morning. They are just, just in major pain, and it's horrible. It's horrible what they go through, and they just can't leave the toilet till, it's like safe around, late morning. So I've been able to see that managed without medication. And so I've seen amazing things. I worked with a doctor who's a surgeon years ago. And it was funny, I worked with the whole family. And finally the wife said, I think my husband is ready to come see you. I'm like, really? So anyway, we worked together for my 12 sessions. And at the end, he said, I have to tell you something. And I said, sure, what is it? And he said, I didn't mention this to you before, but 2 years ago, I started wearing hearing aids, and he was in his mid-50s. And I said, oh, he never mentioned that. And he said, I just went to the audiologist when I was in the hospital. And the audiologist said, I don't know what you're doing, but you do not need any hearing aids at all.
Wow.
Right. And I looked at him, I said, well, I had an idea what I thought it was, but I wanted to hear it from him. I go, what do you think? And he said, it's got to be the systemic inflammation, because we marked it. We found out
Yeah.
massive amounts of systemic inflammation, which nobody tests for. Right.
Right.
And so we got rid of that, and his hearing came back. How crazy,
Incredible. That's
right?
insane. Yeah,
Yeah,
because what do they always tell you it's irreversible, any sort of
exactly.
hearing damage.
Right.
Oh, that's amazing. So let's go back a little bit, because you said the first example that you gave, the woman with the rheumatoid arthritis, what was she eating before, and what did that look like specifically?
Yeah, so she was eating like corn and processed foods like honey baked ham, and a lot of chips, really sort of convenience, the typical American
Standard
diet.
American diet.
Yeah, the
Yep.
set diet. So she was eating that. And she's like, well, what about this? And, lots of dairy and gluten. And, I'll always ask people when they come to see me when they're diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, did your doctor tell you anything about your diet? No. So don't change anything. And gluten is really an offender. And gluten is also really very, very helpful in pulling apart those intestinal lining fissures, the tight junctions. So it promotes leaky gut. So we absolutely we do away with gluten, and typically dairy as well, just all the inflammatory properties of food. So
Mhm.
yeah,
And how long does it take? Like, how long was it for her?
everybody's different. So she, when I spoke to her, she was on like day 84, I think it was, of the AIP protocol. So
Wow.
she was probably around 80 days or so. And I always encourage people, when I did it for 90 days. It's very strict, but it isn't a lifelong death sentence, right? It's just
Right.
it's getting the fire hose out.
It's healing
So
your body. Yeah.
exactly, it's a gift you're giving yourself, and
Hmm.
it's convenient. But it's, if you feel amazing and you're jumping out of bed and with great energy, she's like, oh my God. And she's lost all this weight. And she's like, I can't believe it. Like she's
Right.
a different person.
Yeah.
So when you, what a reward that is, right? I would do anything for that, right?
Right.
So most people will. So anyway, so that's about, 90 days we typically see. I worked with somebody who had Tourette's, and when she went on AIP, the Tourette's went away, which is
That's
crazy,
insane. That's
right?
insane. Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing. Like, and I think that's what people don't get is it's all connected. Our program is primarily marketed as a weight loss program, right? But I always say like it's not just weight loss, like it's a lifestyle because your whole body is connected and you're not even really focused on losing weight. You're focused on healing your body because when you do that, the weight loss just happens. Your body wants to be at a healthy weight. Like that's what happens when when you can balance your hormones and heal your gut and do all of this other stuff. The weight is just a side effect. And
That's
all the
my
other side
mind.
effects are the things that you're going to notice even more, right? All the energy, the lack of inflammation and all of that other stuff. So it's just so crazy to me that we live in this world that is filling us with poison constantly. And then we wonder why we feel like crap and we look like crap and why there's an obesity epidemic and all of
Right.
these things.
I
So
always say weight loss is a side effect of wellness, and we call it
exactly,
wellness. And everybody
exactly.
loses weight. You put beads in the jar in my office, and we lose tons tons of weight. But it isn't about weight loss. It's just, that reward. It's the side effect of wellness. So, yeah,
Yeah.
there's major reasons why we do not lose weight. One is blood sugar dysregulation. Two
Hmm.
is thyroid dysregulation.
Hmm.
Cortisol dysregulation, that's our stress hormone,
Yep.
and sex hormone dysregulation. And the fifth one is an overload of toxins, because toxins live in fat cells. That's why we lose weight when you do my detox for 2 weeks. But as I say, so everybody does it because they want to lose weight, but it really isn't a weight loss program. But everybody does lose weight, but it's a wellness program. And
Yes.
if I can say one thing to your listeners, it's, if there's a fire in the basement, whether it's autoimmunity or something else, it's like asking somebody on the second floor going, hey, can you help me change the light bulb? You wanted to lose weight, but you've got this raging fire. When we are in the state of inflammation, we hold on to all of our resources because we don't know when we're going to use them. We store
Hmm.
iron, we just hold on to everything. Once we put the fire out, people will lose weight.
Yeah. Yeah, it's incredible. It's incredible. So I love that you take such a clinical approach to this and with all the testing and how do you actually approach identifying the root cause of autoimmune and whatever is the disease, that kind of underlying fire that's happening? How do you figure out exactly where the fire is and how to put it out?
So I do a very comprehensive blood screen. So I'm looking for all 4 markers of blood sugar. I'm looking for all 9 markers of thyroid. I'm looking for, sometimes I'll add sex hormones or do that after, but I'm looking at everything, the white blood cell breakdown, so I can see if there's an allergy, a parasite. I'm looking to see the whole general body. I'm looking at inflammation markers, 2 major inflammation markers, so I can see where are we in an inflamed state? Then I do a comprehensive stool test. So it's about 84 pathogens, in addition to the good guys, the bad guys, worms, parasites, fungus, E. coli, H. pylori, all the really major things that really disrupt the microbiome. And then we're looking at, are you producing your own pancreatic enzyme production? Do you have inflammation in the intestinal lining? How is your immunity in your gut? And do you have leaky gut? And a myriad of other things. So by then, once I get those 2 reports back, you're pretty much done with my detox. And now I have a blueprint. I know exactly which direction I'm going. Now, do I know your exact root cause for every autoimmunity? No, not always. I don't. But we know that we are reversing the inflammation. We know that there's a cytokine storm, right? Our Th17 gets activated and we start to have a cytokine storm, an inflammation storm. So if you're autoimmune, I'm going to put that fire out. I may or may not know the cause of that. There's so many things involved that it could be. So, when I was going through my journey, I was eating amazing, and then I was vegan for a while, and then my levels of mercury were so high that I chelated. I stopped eating all animal protein, and I was really vegan, like no pasta, no ice cream, no syrup, like no sugar, nothing. And my blood sugar started to go up a little bit, and my cholesterol was like through the roof. So I knew that I did a Boston Heart Lab on myself, and I knew I had like this high likelihood of having a cardiovascular event. So I knew teeth and heart were related. So I found a biological dentist in LA, and I went to her and I brought my stool test with her, and she goes, "Oh yeah, that's a salivary bacteria." 2 seconds later, I was having a CAT scan, and she found it. I had had my wisdom teeth removed 23 years prior to that visit, and they had left a root in there. It had grown an abscess around it. I felt nothing. You couldn't see anything. You couldn't feel anything. I had zero symptoms, zero. And once they got in there, the surgeon had left a piece of metal in there for all those years. But anyway, they removed all that, cleaned me out with ozone, and next thing you know, my levels started to normalize. So it's crazy, right? So if
Yeah.
what I always suggest is, if you don't feel right, if your blood labs don't show like improvement and something's off, then something's off. You've got to find it, and I will go to the end of the earth to find that. Usually I'll do anything to find out what's going on, because
Yeah.
something's going on, right?
Yeah. 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 Because you know how people are supposed to respond to even to the protocol. And if you're not seeing that response, then something is wrong. So what are your tips then? Like for somebody who's like, okay, I get it. Like I want to start doing the right things. Like where do you even begin?
Well, I would first start with knowing, turn on the lights so we can see the target. So I order the extensive lab work, blood work, and the stool test. So that's where we start. Once we have a baseline and we know which direction we're going in, then it's easy. It's pretty easy.
And what does that look like?
What direction we go in?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
all
Do you have a detox
yeah.
protocol that you do for everybody or
Pretty much everybody starts with my detox, and it's 2 weeks. It's not a starvation diet. It's just cleaning out the liver very gently. You'll feel amazing on it. Your skin will be better, your energy better, everything works better. Yeah, you lose weight, all that, but we're eating real food,
Mhm.
protein, vegetables, sweet potato, yams, and good fats. And once you're doing that, you're having 2 collagen shakes a day. There's plenty of food. You shouldn't be hungry. If you're hungry, you should eat. But once we clean you out, so many of the symptoms possibly will go by the wayside. But it also helps me, because if they don't go by the wayside, then I know, right? I know where to look.
Right.
So, yeah.
Interesting.
And then everybody's different from there, because it depends if you've got, blood sugar dysregulation, or it depends. I worked with a professional athlete. He's probably one of the greatest golfers of our time, Freddie Couples. And he came in to see me. You want to lose 20 pounds before the Masters. But I said, Freddie, I know I've heard all about your back pain for decades. And he said, oh yeah, it's terrible. And I travel with my physical therapist. I'm like, well, tell me about it. Like, so he tells me this whole story and all these doctors, and I'm like, so no surgeries? He said, no, I've never had surgery. So I'm like, has anybody tested you for any inflammation markers? He's like, I don't know. I don't think so. And he lives on 2 golf courses. Both of his homes are on golf courses, and he works on golf courses. He is breathing in chemicals day in and day out. So I tested him, and his inflammation numbers were through the roof. We were able to completely get rid of his inflammation, his back pain. It was
Wow.
crazy, crazy.
Wow.
That's such a different situation, right? So I knew he had smell sensitivity, so I knew there was a lot going on, and so I was able to detox him and decrease his systemic inflammation. So I don't do a one size fits all. If that was the case, I'd put a little chart on my front door and I'd be at the beach. But every person is different. So, but that's the first step I take, so I can find out which direction I'm going.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So if somebody just wants to, they're like, I don't know if I have like all the things, but I want to eat better for less inflammation and like try to be proactive about it, what would be the first things that you would say? Like, what are the things to cut out and what are the things to actually eat?
So sugar is the devil. We've heard this for years, but it's true. Sugar is the devil. It's highly inflammatory. We don't really glean any nutrition from it. So I would
Right.
absolutely cut out the sugar.
Yeah.
The second
That's a
thing is,
given.
that's a given, exactly. And then we cut out the chemicals. Read your labels. Read them. I mean, even if you think they're healthy, just read the labels on everything. If there's seed oils, canola oil, soybean oil, those are highly inflammatory. So don't eat those foods. Even there's a health food market that's a chain that is supposed to be healthy, and they make all their salads now, their chicken salad, their tuna salad, everything's with soybean oil or canola oil. And I make all my own chicken salads and everything because you have to. So take out the inflammatory oils for sure, the chemicals. And then, if we should be really eating foods that don't have a nutritional panel and an ingredient label. So if you pick it, if it sprouted from the ground or it's crawling on the earth, you're pretty good to eat it.
Good advice. Good advice. So what are you working on right now that has you fired up?
I am, my course, my thyroid, my achieving optimal thyroid health. I'm super fired up about that. I put my heart and soul into that course because I know pretty much everything about thyroid, I think. So I really I wish I had that when I was going through what I was going through. So it's a tool for any situation. You're hyper, hypo, autoimmune, thyroidectomy, what to eat, what not to eat, what supplements to take, what supplements not to take, what labs to order, how to read those. It is like my baby that I put that together. And
so good.
yeah.
So
and
important.
yeah.
So let's talk a little bit more about thyroid, because that I think is an issue that comes up, right? And super misunderstood. And almost everybody is immediately put on synthetic hormones, right? Like, I mean, what percentage? And now the statistics about the number of people that are put on synthetic hormones and thyroid that should not be put on them, and that it's causing more harm than good. Like that's all coming out now, and it's sickening to read. But how do you know, and how do you approach this? Like if somebody's dealing with thyroid issues, their doctor says, oh, you need to be on thyroid medication. What do you do?
So, well, first we test to see if it's working.
Mm-hmm.
So oftentimes Synthroid doesn't typically work. It gives you T4, typically it is a T4, synthetic T4, but we have to convert that to our active thyroid hormone. T4 is 93% of the equation and it's inactive. It's just inactive. We need to cleave off one atom of iodine and convert that to T3. That's our active thyroid hormone, only 7%. So the doctors give it to you and they go, I hope you convert, but they don't even test the T3 to find out.
Right.
So we're basically waiting until you come in exhausted, way out of lab range. I just had a patient just a couple weeks ago came in with their TSH was at 10, which is insanely high, and been on Synthroid for 25 years. So it's it's criminal, really. So and it depends. I'm working with somebody right now who said, you know what, I've got low thyroid, but I do not want to go on meds. I said, okay, well, how compliant will you be? He said 100%. I said, great. We just got his labs and we have totally moved the needle. We're not quite there, but really close to there and without meds. So I've given him all the nutrients that he needs for that thyroid. And we give him that support, and he's doing all the other things lifestyle wise that he needs to do. And it's working, but not everybody has the same situation.
Right. So the only real way is to work with somebody like you to figure out exactly what's going on, dive into it, change the lifestyle, and actually test for it, because it's true. The doctors only test for the T4. They don't even test for T3. They just dole it out and cross their fingers and hope it works, and don't care when you tell them it's not.
And I've tested for all 9 markers of the thyroid, because are your sex hormones affecting your thyroid? Is your cortisol, your inflammation affecting your thyroid? Are you creating any antibodies? So there's so many things, and there's free, and then there's total. So we don't know what where your markers are. So I look at all of them because I'm not really good at guessing. I mean, I probably could after all these years, but I don't like to, because everybody is different. So you have to get the facts, right, to know how to fix it.
Right. So do you find that if somebody's dealing with a thyroid issue, that they're almost always dealing with all of these other issues too, because they're so interconnected? Or is it thyroid seems to be off on its own in a kind of its own little bubble, and the other ones are like, do you find that one affects the other, or not really?
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah, not always, but most times there is something affecting it. Reverse T3, if somebody has a very stressful lifestyle or they're eating very stressful foods, because it could be, food, environment, relationships, work, it could be any myriad of stress. And if you're not doing anything to decrease that cortisol, it's going to start pulling from your reserves of your T3, right?
Mm,
So same thing with inflammation, it's, as I said, we hold on to everything. So we're going to take from that. When we're in an inflamed state. And then uptake, your T3 uptake is, you're competing, your sex hormones are competing through your thyroid site. So we have to make sure that if you're out of balance with your sex hormones, your endocrine system is three departments, basically. You have your cortisol, your stress hormones, your adrenal glands, you have
mhm.
your sex hormones. So, for women, this changes every single solitary day. And then we have our thyroid, right, which is our temperature
Mhm.
gauge, metabolism, but a lot of other systems. So it's imperative that that is a symphony that's working together. If
Right.
something is regulated, forget weight loss, right? But it's also, you're not going to feel great. And it's like a ping pong effect. It's just going to start, bouncing off the wall
Right.
and create havoc.
Right. Because they're also interconnected. So, what do you do about cortisol? Right. Like this one comes up a lot for me because being like a high stress person, right? High strung and driven entrepreneur and doing all the things all the time. I'm like, I got to get my cortisol down. I got to get my cortisol down. Right. But I almost feel like you get so like stressed about your stress levels that your stress levels stay high just because you're like, I'm so type A, I'm going to approach this. Like, what do you do? What do you do for cortisol?
Yeah, I totally get that. Yeah. Another thing on your to-do list, right? I gotta get my cortisol
Yes,
down. Yeah.
yes, yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
So there's lots of ways we handle cortisol. There's natural ways. There's a lot of natural remedies, which I'll go through, and then there's supplement help. Which if somebody's really in tough shape, I usually give some kind of natural supplement assistance. And the bad news about cortisol dysregulation is it takes time to regulate it. Um, it's a slow mover. But the things that you can do naturally about it, that you can do at home, is an Epsom salt bath, 2 cups or more for 20 minutes or more in an Epsom salt bath a few times a week. Harder to do in the summer, easier in the winter, right before bed. Make sure there's no chemicals in it or fragrances, just, that, and maybe essential oils you can put. And then nighty night, it will help balance you out. Phosphatidylserine is another, I use a cream with phosphatidylserine that helps regulate hormones. But other things that you can do naturally is some kind of meditation or unplugging or laughing or getting into nature and just taking yourself out of the stressful situation. Walking on a farm, walking in the woods, walking, breathing fresh air, putting your feet in grass, those are all things that are going to help balance your cortisol. Not exercising too hard. Definitely thyroid people, I wouldn't recommend doing, 5 days a week at cycle or running, huge distances. It's not good for the thyroid. And so working out in the morning and not in the evening, that'll pump up your cortisol. And there's lots of de-stress teas that are really good with lavender, ashwagandha, licorice root. There's tons of things that you can do naturally to help that stress. And of course, managing your food intake, making sure that it's not high stress foods, the chemicals, and lots of work for your liver to kind of figure out what this is.
So basically, take it easy.
Yeah, yeah, balance. Let's use the
Balance.
word balance.
Yes. Yes. That is my personal struggle bus. I love it. Well, this is so interesting. How can we learn more from you and to tell us more about where we can find you, where we can find your program? And I would love to just know a little bit more.
Yeah, you can find me on my website at Risa, R-I-S-A, Groux, Groux, nutrition.com. That's where my book Food Frame is, and the subtitle is Diet is a 4-letter word, because I'm not a big fan of that diet restriction thing. It's just eating lifestyle. So I break down the 6 major eating lifestyles that I usually work with in my office, and I go through my detox as well. It's really great information in that book. In addition is my course, Achieving Optimal Thyroid Wellness, on that, or Achieving Optimal Thyroid Health, on that, on my website as well. I have tons of recipes. You can take your quiz, which diet type is best for you, And it's really helpful because if you're AIP or low lectin or paleo or keto, it really helps you. And then I have a boatload of recipes from all the different diet types and meal types. So it's really, really helpful. Instagram, social media is all Risa Grew Nutrition. And I work with people all over the country via Zoom. So, I love watching people heal.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much, Risa. I'm sure there are lots of people who are wanting to check out that course and all those resources. And I just appreciate your time and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Ruth. Thank you for having me.
All right, guys, that about does it for this episode. I hope you found this topic as fascinating as I did. And if you know anybody who might be interested, maybe somebody who's struggling with hormonal issues or thyroid conditions or autoimmune, please be sure to send it their way. Then be sure to subscribe to the podcast to be notified of future episodes. And I will see you back here for another new episode very soon.